It's a Man Crush Monday. Join Professor Buzzkill as he crushes on men from history who deserve more fame and glory.
Hello there, Buzzkillers. It's another Man Crush Monday. You know, reporters and photographers rarely get discussed on this show, and that's a pity because in one way at least, reporters and photographers help provide a lot of the original material that historians use to study events and try to build up as full a picture as possible about the past. But one of the great dangers in relying too much on journalistic evidence in writing history is forgetting that those pieces of reportage were usually produced with a specific audience in mind, that is, readers and consumers of news. In times of war, accurate news usually has to be cleared by military officials and government leaders before it's presented to the public. And those higher-ups are often worried that bad war news will hurt morale and hurt war support back home. Often, therefore, gruesome details of bloody battles were suppressed. This is what happened during the Pacific battles of World War II, at least in terms of perceptions of the war among the American public at home. Starting in 1939, the news from the European War had been fairly complete. Even before the United States entered that theater, the European conflict was already known to be bloody and horrific. The detailed news was unavoidable. After Pearl Harbor, however, a long way away in the middle of the Pacific, most Americans believed that the Pacific War wouldn't be as costly in terms of lives, because it would be mainly a naval and air conflict, no real grinding land battles. They were wrong, and they found that out in late 1943, early 1944. The brutality of mechanized war became all too apparent to U.S. Navy and Marine commanders when they were forced to island hop across the Pacific in order to gain footholds that would lead to defeating the Japanese. For the most part, however, that knowledge was kept back from the public home in the United States. When the battle for the Central Pacific island of Tarawa began in 1943, Time Life reporter Robert Sherrod was there to report on what was thought to be a relatively easy conquest, or at least what was going to be a relatively easy conquest. Accompanying him was Marine cinematographer Norman Hatch, who carried a Bell & Howell IMO motion picture camera and a .45 caliber pistol. We don't know if Hatch had to use that pistol, but he certainly made extensive use of the motion picture camera. The film he took of the 3-day-long bloody conquest of the island depicted actual battle scenes in fairly stark detail. Most significantly for the history of war journalism, the footage depicted wounded Marines as well as dead ones, some of them gruesomely so, including pictures of severely burnt Marine bodies, men who had been caught up in the flames of battle. And here's the audio from a particularly unsettling part of what became a documentary from that film.
These are Marine dead. This is the price we have to pay for a war we didn't want. And before it's over, there'll be more dead on other battlefields.
That was a Warner Brothers documentary entitled With the Marines at Tarawa. Unlike other war documentaries, the gruesome and graphic footage was left in. But Warner Brothers and Hollywood deemed eventually that With the Marines at Tarawa was too graphic and awful to be released to the public. Now, only the President Roosevelt, could overrule that decision, and the man perhaps most responsible for that was the reporter Robert Sherrod. Robert Sherrod also captured all this frontline action, but of course, he recorded it with his pen rather than a camera. But he wasn't just another reporter. He had known President Roosevelt at least since 1942. Back in Washington, D.C., in December of 43, following the Battle of Tarawa, Sherrod was asked to meet with FDR in the Oval Office. Now, based on Sherrod's previous reporting and his earlier discussions with FDR, the president had come to trust his judgment. And going against the tide of opinion in the military hierarchy and in the civilian government, Sherrod told the president, quote, "That's the way the war is out there. And I think the people are going to have to get used to that idea. Our soldiers on the front want people back home to know that they don't knock the hell out of them every battle that is the enemy. They want people to understand that war is horrible, nasty business, and to say otherwise is to do a disservice to those who died. Largely based on Sherrod's advice, FDR decided to overrule Hollywood strictures. The documentary came out in March 1944 to very positive reviews and an eventual Academy Award. Perhaps most significantly, the sale of war bonds increased after the public saw the reality that With the Marines at Tarawa depicted. And eventually, a great number of Americans came to know and understand the reaction of some of the parents of servicemen killed in the Pacific. We've mentioned in an earlier show how some military commanders and FDR received hate mail from bereaved mothers, and it was written in the most direct and heartfelt manner. After the Tarawa documentary was shown, only truly heartless people would talk about noble sacrifice without thinking a little bit, at least, about the deep pain that the war caused to bereaved families. Buzzkillers, I learned about Robert Sherrod from a Smithsonian Magazine article written by the historian Ray Boomhauer, and this episode owes a great deal to his work. Mr. Boomhauer's work about Robert Sherrod's reports from the Pacific Theater is on the Buzzkill bookshelf, and we encourage you to get it. So that's our Man Crush Monday of the week, Robert Sherrod, and we'll talk to you next week.